So, welcome to the Mountain Pass for something a little bit different. This is going to be a 2v2v2, so it's a team-based free-for-all, and I've always rather liked this map. It's been in since vanilla, and I like all the different ways you can go around. I like the elevation that the map has and all the different pathways. It's pretty neat, and I think it lends itself quite well to a free-for-all because it means you can go around in different directions. Maybe it would have been better for a sort of a six-way individual free-for-all because of all the different paths, but I did want to have each individual alliance be quite big so that the engagements could be quite big scale, or larger scale, I should say. Get my grammar right. Anyway, we'll go through the army compositions now, and starting off over here we have the alliance that I was a part of. I'm playing as the High Elves. So over here in the hills I've just got two Sindar Blade Masters hidden and awaiting my orders, and back down here we have the main bulk of my army. I of course have some of the Noldor Elders where my general are. Extremely good archer unit, going to be relying on them heavily in the late game, I feel. Then I also have a Ballista. I have several units of Sword Quindi all around my army, of course. And in this patch, Sword Quindi are really a necessity, although that will change a little bit in the next patch because the Elves will have a few more units that they can get in a little bit more numbers, so the Sword Quindi won't be completely reliant on them being the centre of your army. I've also got Elder Enway Archers. I've got some units of Imladris Storm Raiders. They're going to be another unit that changes pretty significantly in the next patch. You know, the Elder Enway Swordsmen really are mostly the better choice at this point, but they will be getting their own identity and will be made useful. More Sword Quindi. A couple of units of Linden Long Spears just in behind these Elder Enway Spearmen in Shield Wall. Definitely one of the sites from vanilla that stayed, which I really like. The Elves in Shield Wall. And then I also have some Bow Quindi up here behind some spikes, and then another unit of Storm Raiders. My ally is Umbar, and he's, well, Dwayling is playing as Umbar, and we have several units of Corsair Warriors. He's gone obviously for a little bit less of a quality build than I have because, you know, I'm the Elves. Belagir Halberds and Corsair Savages, so a lot of good centre to your army, and he's also got some Castamir's Chosen back here. I'd have preferred to see the Harbingers of Castamir, honestly, in this sort of situation where you need to break through choke points, because that's what you're going to have to do on Mountain Pass, but the Chosen are still a very good unit. Warlords of Umbar, he's also got some Naru Naaru Royal Archers, some Corsairs Fencers, and he's got some Castamir's Rangers hidden somewhere. There are a few hidden units, of course, that I won't be able to go through. Directly opposite us, we have an alliance of two Mordor armies, so with Mordor you know what to expect. They're going to have a lot of fodder units and a lot of high tier units, so we have Temple Inquisitors, Morgul Chosen, and then just with them you have Orc Maulers and Orc Fodder. Sauron's Will, again, one of the scarier units. Uruk Archers, Standard Uruks. There's a lot of units in here. There's Sauron's Will, there's Númenórean Shield Guard, there's Balrogs and Olag High. Brainy Smurf and Escal Nordia are the two Mordor players. So yeah, this is Brainy Smurf's army, and then back here we have Nordia's. Again, a lot of fodder, so he's got a lot of free units and at least a lot of very cheap units. And then he's got some Moranon Halberds. And back here we have some of his scariest stuff like the Morgul Chosen, Temple Inquisitors, Sauron's Will again. They've both got Nazgul as well. And again, lesser Balrogs and Olag High, and then he's also got the Melkor's Chosen. Mordor will be receiving a lot of indirect buffs, but they'll also be taking some direct nerfs as well in the next patch, I believe. So it kind of balances itself out to where Mordor is going to be just as powerful as they are now, I think, more or less, but just in different ways. And he has some Moranon bows, of course, very effective archer unit, going to make it difficult for me to advance as well as him trying to advance through my archers. And then out here, just outside the Mountain Pass itself, we have the alliance of the two strongest factions in the meta at the moment, Gundabad and the Woodland Realms. Gundabad being played by Baconfish 302, Warg Riders, Black Uruk Warband, Witch Realm Blackguard. Again, the Blackguard are very good, a sword and shield unit that's anti-armor. Warg Riders. Then back here we have some Black Uruks of the Mountains and some Guardians of Kharn Dûm, two very solid units indeed. More Black Uruks, some Witch Realm Hammers, so he's got some very scary units all throughout. Some Scourge Raiders. Again, if you can keep them away from the archers that are littered throughout the mountains, they will do very well in melee. And some more Black Uruks. Similar story with them really. And I know that he's got some Goblin Trackers hidden and some Númenórean Shadow Bows. Is that them? No, they're Witch Realm Pikemen, Ballista, and more Pikes. So he's got his Ballista slightly forward in case they charge through the canyons at him. And then over here we have the Woodland Realms, Elder Kingsguard and Pathfinders as the cav. And then we have some Elder Royal Council, Avari Pikemen, Forest Bladesmen in force as well. You're going to need to sacrifice somewhere. Forest Wardens. Then at the front here you have some Elder Royal Guard, two units of Elder Royal Guards. They've gone pretty heavy with their archers, but as the Woodland Realms, you really can't fault them for that. They've got a smaller army. They've probably got some units hidden as well. Like they've probably got some Sentinels hidden or some Hine Dower. But yes, You know, the Woodland Realms army is certainly smaller than Gundabad's, but together they're very scary. And here you have some Shadow Guard. There must be the Goblin Trackers. But yeah, they basically offset each other perfectly, and individually they're both the most powerful factions. But they aren't in the mountains. They start out here in this open ground, so they don't have the choke points to take advantage of like the other two armies do. But without further ado, we shall start, although I will need to make a little bit of a cut because this battle to play was probably about, you know, not too much shorter than the Osgiliath siege I did, but in terms of actual action there were 3 very, very wide like pauses in the action while we were all manoeuvring. So we'll get to the action that starts first. So as we can see, after a lengthy setup phase, the fodder is finally starting to attack, and in this sort of situation I don't blame them for sending up just fodder, because it does mean that obviously you can save some, because you know, no alliances were made at this point in the battle between the teams, so they just wanted to test the lines, sort of get the battle started, and I can understand that. And if you look over here, I was actually trying to get my bow Quindy into position on this hill to shoot into some of their back units, but the fodder was over here and I didn't want to get my archers into melee too quickly. But yeah, the fodder is not too keen on charging in, but it does want to maintain its presence here. It's in loose formation as well, which you will often see because it means that cav charges and charges in general won't have quite the same impact on them. Nonetheless, if we look back over here, we can also see that the Woodland Realms are starting, yeah, and they do have some hidden E-Dower. But yes, they intend to skirmish down Umbar, and that is completely unsurprising because Umbar, relatively solid as an infantry force, and the Woodland Realms can certainly maintain a cavalry advantage over them. But for the time being, that's just going to be a skirmish. There have been a few very minor skirmishes, but here is where my ally decides that sending forward the Corsair Savages that he sent down to my front line is a good idea. And I agree, because the fodder is so weak that the Savages with their high attack should be able to rip through them relatively quickly, and they won't take too many casualties in return. And we will at least be taking away some of Mordor's numbers, which honestly the fodder could be used to pretty good effect later on in the battle to shield some of their better units. So if we can deny them some of their numbers, some of their ability to swarm, that will be most welcome. Now the Savages here are a little bit too tightly packed together for my liking. You know, you should be using the whole canyon. You know, this one over here has got the ability to sort of skirt around the outside of this fodder a little bit. If we get in a little closer, you know, the fodder taking a pretty hefty charge from the front from Corsair Savages, and that's going to lead to their downfall pretty quickly. The Savages aren't the most durable unit in the world, but in this sort of situation they should do very, very well, particularly because the fodder is rather spaced out. They're not clumping up to try and sort of face these Savages. They're only being sent in 2 at a time, so Nordir's Savages, or Nordir's fodder I should say, falling by the wayside to Dwaylin's Savages. And I do like the Savages. I do like their axes and that sort of, those claws that they have on their gauntlets. They're certainly a no-nonsense kind of unit. They're good at one thing, and that's it. But yes, it's actually interesting that the Mordor player has not sent forward archers, which is why, you know, this is not a bad idea, because if he had sent forward archers, it definitely wouldn't have been. Savages are very, very vulnerable to missiles. But yeah, he's sending in more fodder now. And this is the first of the engagements, and you can see that my ballista is firing, and actually this is a good time to speak about one of my mistakes that I made. I tried to move my ballista onto a cliffside, and it did this. So yeah, this is still something that happens, obviously, and I was rather foolish to even try and put my... I was going to try and put it over there where I've got my archers now, but unfortunately it didn't work out in the end. Let's go and have a look over here at the Woodland Realms. They're moving forward some bladesmen. Dwayling is sending forward his Corsair warriors, so he has chased off the archers for the time being. Goblin trackers and Hin Dower. And again, these forest bladesmen, they're also retreating, and that's a wise move because they've managed to set up some Witch Realm pikemen over here. And Corsair warriors will be no match for the pikemen, and very wisely, his Corsairs are retreating. So again, it's going to be a bit of a game of cat and mouse between the skirmishers over here and the armies. And really, their main armies are just standing back. They don't really need to move. The only real melee fight that's going on at the moment is over here. I'd lost it for a second, and now we have a little bit of a problem, because he has sent forward his Melkor's Chosen, and on the charge they will do fantastic damage to these Corsair Savages. Now, the hit points will be bled away from these Melkor's Chosen somewhat by the Savages, but not to the extent that we can save them, really. So this is the point where I decide to send forward some Linden Longspears, and I'm also going to send forward my Quindy to sort of reinforce our position here, so we have the mass to sort of not be crushed underfoot by this very, very elite unit of Caragors. And as you can see, this is going to be another very lethal charge by the Melkor's Chosen and their enormous maces. But yeah, they have the ability to just mulch their way through. And honestly, my Linden long spears on a charge will be crushed underfoot by them as well. But it's just a matter of trying to get some mass in there, trying to make it so they can't easily charge. Trying to make it so that they also take damage, because the Melkor's Chosen is a pretty big loss. If they lose them here, it's not really worth it, because they're not going to break through here no matter what. They've only sent forward fodder. If they were making a concerted push, then yes, I would say that the Melkor's Chosen being deployed here is exactly the sort of thing you want to see. But yes, as you can see, I've also sent forward some Quindi, just to reinforce the lines, a little bit more survivable than the Savages. And now the fodder is also starting to rout en masse. So while the Melkor's Chosen may be cycle charging, we're going to be able to knock the hit points off them, which is going to be bad for them in the long run. This is not their general unit though. Their general is in the Nazgul unit that's at the back. So, you know, it's not as if he's committing his general in here to a fight they can't win, really. More fodder is being committed, but again, they're not going to last too long in melee against Corsair Savages. Also got my Linden long spears in the back, ready. Yes, the sight of this engagement is... it's going pretty well for us so far, although that Melkor's Chosen could change that pretty significantly. If we look up on this hill, you can see there's a lot of dead Morannon bows, and that is because... let's see if I can get up there. Here we are. There was a unit of Naaru Royal Archers shooting them down. Actually, I don't think it was them. I think it was the Castamir's Rangers, which is probably hidden at the moment. At least that's what I was told during the battle. You don't want to spend your best archers on a skirmish fight if you can help it. But yes, as you can see, the Corsair Savages are now starting to really take a beating from these Melkor's Chosen. But the Melkor's Chosen, they have lost a few unit models. So it's hard to say whether this is a good trade or not for us. The only team this is really good for, of course, is the Woodland Realms and Gundabad, who have taken virtually no losses so far because they haven't really engaged. So yes, it's going to be a rather interesting situation our teams find ourselves in, because those two armies have find themselves relatively untouched, whereas, you know, a lot of fodder and a lot of savages have died, which admittedly is not really the core of our army, but it is still numbers that we're being denied. So eventually we're going to have to come to a decision to maybe stop this slaughter and try and seek a common enemy. But for the time being, still the fodder fights, and they are shaken, being crushed underfoot by these Axemen. They're also taking a charge in the back from their own Caragors. And again, they're getting a bit dangerously close to these pikes, which I'm trying to sort of send in. You know, the Linden long spears is definitely not the best pikes. Probably one of the worst, to be honest with you. Simply because they have such a horrendous lack of mass, but they will still do very, very well against cavalry units in sustained melee. Yes, as you can see, Orc fodder just being endlessly sent in. But is it to good effect? I mean, the Savages have been pretty handily cut down, but they're not any... oh, there goes my ballista trying to target the Melkor's Chosen. Hard to do when they're moving around so much, but they're not going to break through here. You know, my forces, which are the bulk of what are down here, are still largely untouched. I mean, the Sword Quindi, I think, I remember seeing in the battle that they took literally no losses in melee to the Orc fodder. And again, this might be because the Corsair Savages were sort of a cushion in front of them. But even so, I mean, again, I'm not going to chase them, because that plays into the Melkor's Chosen's hands. And there are still Orc fodder back there, and it's much better to let them come to me. There are still a few units of Corsair Savages. Most of the Savages are dead, so I mean, all in all, I would say it's kind of a mutual loss. Maybe a little bit more for us, to be honest with you. Because while there's a lot of Savages dead, or a lot of fodder dead, I should say, the Savages are a little bit more important. And the Melkor's Chosen, while they may have taken a few losses, well, they've actually taken quite a few. I don't know. It's very much a no-one wins sort of scenario. And here's my front line. A mix of Quindi and Linden long spears. It's not the most scary thing in the world. But in bulk, they are going to be difficult to break down. Eventually, Linden will be their own faction, I hear. So that should be interesting. But here we can see, again, these Corsair Savages rather foolishly didn't get behind the shield wall. And this means that the Melkor's Chosen are going to be able to get a side charge on them and basically wipe them off the face of the earth. Although that Orc fodder is sort of blocking their charge a little bit. Well, not the best charge, because they had to go through their own men. So they won't instantly break and rout. Might even be able to get a few swings off in melee against the Melkor's Chosen. Again, simple pirates against even simpler orcs. Not counting the Karagor riders, of course. Again, you know, at this point it was really a case of we should have got behind a shield wall, or at least a makeshift shield wall, the Sword Quindi. Not able to form that. Linden Longspears can from Spear Wall, of course. A little bit more of a deterrent for that Melkor's Chosen. Yes, let's go back over to the other front and see what's going on over here, because as we can see, the Witch Realm pikemen have set up on the other side of this valley with Forest Bladesmen in reserve. We can see that there are a few dead Umbar units, and rightly so. My ally has decided to seek shelter behind the cliff, and if the enemy charges in, he can easily attack from both sides with blackguards and warriors. So yes, it's very much a game of waiting and seeing what happens over on this front. But over here the battle is in effect. This Orc fodder is still charging into the front lines. Again though, most of this is routing because it is units that have returned, so as soon as they hit the pikes, they rout because they realise there's no hope for them in terms of getting through this mess. Yeah, all of those. There are still savages in melee, amazingly enough. A unit of 4. These brave men. A unit of 3. There's a ballista shot. Well, they're being stun locked now by the fodder, so it's likely all over for them. Oof. We got a kill. There are still 2 of them left. You can see my ballista still firing into the fodder because I knew it couldn't move at this point and I did want it to get at least some kills, so I just had it fire from the hillside. Yeah, these Corsair savages, surely they will fall. A unit of 252 is shaken just fighting these 2. And they're still eager. Oof, not so eager anymore. Just this one individual. He's shaken now as well. He doesn't seem to know what to do. He's being poked. Poked by the spears. Didn't quite get a kill there. His eyes are bloodied, so he's probably blind. Will he fall? No. He will get a kill. I mean, surely he will now. Look at the amount of spears near his head. Yeah, there he goes. So there go the last of the savages. Again, not sure how they were used, really. It's kind of a mix. I'm trying to get these Sindar Blade Masters out now. I did send them over here because I was looking for a pathway up and around Mordor, but it turns out the only one is a pathway up to here, which is useless for a melee unit. If it was a unit of archers, maybe, but it is not. So these Sindar Blade Masters are just sort of running for no real reason. I mean, they're extremely, extremely fast. They won't be a part of the High Elves anymore in the next patch. The only one to have access to them will be Lothlorien, which I think is right because it's a unit that's very, very good, and Lothlorien needs some selling points. But now we can just see there's sort of an angry stare off here. There's more fodder. The real question is, what will happen now? Let's go back over to the other front, because I know that the first stage is not completely gone yet. But if we look here, we can see goblin trackers firing their missiles, some of them hitting the hillside, but it doesn't really matter. Because again, Umbar does not have the skirmish advantage here. All of the Gundabad and Woodland Realm skirmishes can be brought to bear against him. So he's sending forward his warriors once more. Will they catch these goblin archers? It looks like they will. These goblins are not getting out of the way fast enough, although they don't seem to give a shit that they got charged. So in the end it's going to be a Corsair Warrior versus Forest Bladesman battle, and the Forest Bladesman should win that fairly handily. The Corsair Warriors are not the finest infantry units in the world. They look pretty cool, but ultimately they don't really have that bit of punch that the Forest Bladesmen have. Meanwhile, back over here, the Orc fodder are trying to attack on this front, but again, against the Quindi they're not really going to have a lot of luck. The Quindi are much superior to them, so it really is a bit of a trash fight on all fronts. At least a trash fight in, terms of what the factions can bring, of course. Forest Bladesmen and Quindi are not trash at all. Again, these pikes are not quite in melee. I should have had them forwards a little bit more so I could get the additional bit of poke damage. Some of these Quindi are getting a little bit bloodied. These Orc fodder are shaken. And in melee, the Orc fodder really don't have much on the Quindy. They really need to sort of push with a bit more quality if they want to get through here. Otherwise, they're just throwing units into the meat grinder at this point. I mean, it's possible that they could want to send forward their cavalry units, their Melkor's Chosen. You know, that could probably break through because the Quindy and the Linden Longspears don't have the greatest mass in the world. But I do have 2 units of Quindy in reserve, and I also have these guys. I have the Storm Raiders, and they have a bonus versus cavalry, and they certainly aren't the low tier units that I've got at the front line at the moment. I do like the Storm Raiders. They're probably my favourite looking unit at the moment. I like the Imladris armour, and I'm also a big fan of the sort of anti-cavalry sword they've got going on. And that's going to become a lot more their focus. They're going to become a lot more anti-cavalry in the next patch. And they're going to become better overall, but they are going to get noticeably more expensive. They're going to become one of those high elven units that really you can only afford one of. But here we can see the Quindy. They don't have shield wall, which is a bit of a shame. But they still haven't taken any losses. Well, this unit at the top has 104. So definitely some Quindy losses up here, but the Orc fodder is just not going to make it. It's not going to be able to get through. If you look at the background, there are Morannon bows firing. They are firing, I think, at the bow Quindy over here. Or are they firing at the Elder Enway? But the point is, the bow Quindy are not being hit by their arrows, and that's really the bow Quindy's weakness. Their weakness to skirmish fire, because they're very cheap. They're only 250 florins, I think. And they do 10 missile damage, and they have the very long missiles trait, which is something even some of the highest tier archers don't have. So if you can get the bow Quindy into a fight like this where they're not being targeted, they can pay for themselves extremely easily. And it's the only archer unit that I'm really using the ammo of. If you look down here, you can see the Morannon units. They were already ravaged by the Castamir's Rangers, and now they're receiving the same treatment from my bow Quindy. So Mordor's skirmish capabilities are dramatically being lessened as time goes on. And again, if we look over here, my Sindar Blade Masters return to the front line. There's a lot of routing going on. Again, this is really just the first stage, the wearing down of all the armies, and then late stage it will turn into a little bit more of a meat grinder for all sides. But yeah, this Orc fodder is going to get nowhere. If they were still pushing with the Caragors, I would say this potentially could be a good idea if they could get in behind my lines, because they probably could. I mean, if they smash through, they would take a lot of damage on the way through, and there might only be a few of them left alive on the other side, but they'd be able to run around and cause quite a bit of annoyance for me. It's all what they want to do. But yeah, now some of the Linden Longspears are in melee. Or at least I think they are. They are fighting, so the pikes are in effect somewhere. You can see they're not really going to get through. A few of the Quindy have sort of left the protection of the pikes. It doesn't really matter. I mean, they're wavering at this point. They get more fodder on the way in. Bad news for me. Let's go over to the other front again, where it's a little bit more of a focused engagement. Again, these Belagir halberds were sent forward. There are Corsair warriors, but ultimately, if you look over here, there are a lot of Goblin trackers providing a lot of numbers, but really I think the main problem is going to be these Witch Realm pikemen. I mean, the pikemen are going to be able to poke these Belagir halberds into submission, and these Hint A Dower are able to get in amongst them, so this is bad for them. I mean, the Corsair warriors behind them will probably have slightly better luck because they're not being sort of crushed out of position, but there are still pikes over here. Yeah, this is not really a great engagement for Umbar. They are being focused down essentially by two factions, like they're committing a few units to sort of wear down Umbar. But even so, I would say, if this was the case, Umbar should maybe have just sort of waited. I mean, they do have good archers of their own. I mean, Castamir's Rangers, and this is not really the best shot that he's getting off on these units over here. Again, though, it's hard to know what to do in the heat of the moment, I suppose, in this sort of situation where you're being focused down by two armies, or at least you're engaged forces that are greater than your own. Over here, the fodder is still in melee, which I respect them. Well, no, they're not. Are they? What are they doing? Surely not. Well, they're going to break immediately if they do that. They try and get right up in the faces of these pikes. A few more Quindy have died. You can see that one's got a completely bloodied face. Who said that the elves had no fury? But yeah, the fodder horde has been thoroughly diffused, I think. It would be fair to say. And I haven't really committed the bulk of my forces just yet. And here is where I would have a choice, because it's obvious that Woodland Realms and Gundabad are on top at the moment. So I really should go to reinforce my ally, and I believe that is what I'm doing actually. If we go back over here, I am sending over my Sindar Blade Masters just to give them a little bit more quality over here in case the enemy decides to really push through this high valley over here. And whenever you play on Mountain Pass, this particular valley always becomes a bit of a killing zone. If we look back here, we can see, I believe this is Elder Royal Guard. Yes, it is. Very, very strong archer unit indeed, carrying their axes. They've won me battles on their own before. I mean, the Woodland Realms archers are... Well, the Woodland Realms overall are getting a nerf next patch, because I believe overall they are the strongest faction at the moment. I mean, Gundabad aren't far behind, but... Actually, let's go over here, because yes, the Orc fodder are routing in their entirety. So that is it for them. And again, we can see over here, in fact, there is a unit of Warg Riders from Gundabad coming over here. And again, I think they're sort of searching for ways of just wearing down the other two alliance's armies, just so they can have an even bigger advantage. And this is why I said that attacking with the Melkors chosen into my front line wasn't necessarily the worst idea, because as we can see, he's not actually going for the routing Orc fodder, despite the fact they have returned to the fight, nor is he going for the sort of depleted archers. He's actually going for my front line, which on first glance doesn't look like the best idea, because there are pikes, in addition to the sort of additional mass that the Quindi are providing. But the Wargs are pretty lethal, and as we can see, they come in. I mean, they do take some damage initially from the pike line, but they're able to sort of get into that gap that was in the line. Very slight gap it was. But they get a lethal charge off on this Sword Quindi. And here you can see I'm bringing forward my Storm Raiders. I noticed that they were going for my lines too late. And while they did lose a few Wargs, they easily managed to get more damage done to my lines. And that is bad news for me. So yeah, again, it's all about bleeding your enemies in a sort of free-for-all like this. And then if we go over here, Umbar, well, that is a mountainside, but over here we can see that Umbar is under real pressure. I mean, the Corsair warriors are routing and broken, and the Elder Royal Guard is continuing to shoot down through the valleys. A lethal unit, and again, he's not really able to get the kind of fire returned on them that is needed. As we can see, these Castamir's Rangers have really been thoroughly bested. Again, it's really due to the angle that he's not, because these Naru Naaru would actually be able to do a decent amount of damage to them in a ranged fight, but he hasn't got the right angle. Can't arc those shots, and he's sending forward these Rangers. Are they out of ammo? Yes, they are. They have their swords out. This is a complete waste of a unit, to be honest with you. I mean, this fight down here is lost. Just abandon it. There's no hope for you here, and definitely not if you're just sending forward Rangers. But, well, wherever that he is, I don't know, I mean, it seems to me like he's committing more and more men to this fight needlessly, and he's playing right into the enemy's hands by allowing his forces to be bled. I mean, eventually he is going to have to fall back his armies. But yes, I think actually at this point it would be prudent of me to make another cut, because I don't think he actually commits anything else and they end up just getting mulched. And there is a bit of a change of tone in the battle, but it does take a little while to arrive, so I will make a cut until that is so. So as you can see, Mordor is advancing through this valley and is going to be attacking the Woodland Realms position and the Gundabad position back here, and they seem to be largely underprepared to deal with this. I mean, they've only got one unit of pikemen. They do have the Wood Elf cavalry, and they do have some wargs, but this is a big, big push from Mordor. I mean, they're committing most of their armies, to be honest with you, and, you know, they did, obviously, you know, there was a bit of team chat going on, and I allowed them to pass because I realised that, you know, it was going to be a case of if we kept fighting one another, the Woodland Realms and Gundabad would so easily win this fight, so I allowed them to pass without engaging them at all, and this meant that Mordor was able to come forward and sort of leave the mountain pass area and engage the Woodland Realms and Gundabad from this front. And this also means, of course, that if we look up here, you know, we're going to be able to engage them from this front as well, so it's going to be an interesting sort of situation where we're not going to be able to engage them to the same extent that Mordor is, but they can either keep attacking us up this hill, or they can fall back and try and face Mordor, like, exclusively. So it's going to be an interesting sort of It's going to be an interesting dynamic to see how this continues, because obviously at the start it was just a case of kill whoever's closest to you, but now there's a little bit more team tactics going on. As we can see, there is Elder Pathfinders cavalry. A little bit, you know, considering they have hit points, they are a little bit fragile, but, you know, getting right up into the face of these Melkor's Chosen and Olag High maybe isn't the best place for them. I mean, they are cycle charging, so maybe it isn't the worst idea, but yes, the Woodland Realms and Gundabad armies are going to need to sort of form up a little bit better than they are at the moment. I mean, they're kind of scattered a little bit, and if Mordor continues this dense push that is happening, they're going to find themselves in a little bit of trouble. But this is where the majority of the action is now. Mordor again committing much more than just fodder like they were against my front line. You know, Olag High, Melkor's Chosen, sending forward the majority of their halberds as well. There's also Balrogs in the background. Now, charging into Pike's front on is actually something that Trolls can do now. I mean, to be honest with you, Trolls, you know, Pike, this is one of the reasons why I think Pikes are no longer as good as they used to be, because one of the things that Pikes always used to be really, really good at was facing Trolls. This is no longer the case in my experience. They tend to just smash their way through Pikes with relative ease. Now, of course, the balance of forces is evenly matched, but now Balrogs are coming in, and Balrogs, of course, are an extremely tough unit. You know, combined with Olag High, I mean, you know, defeat is going to be almost certain. They should be sending up units to reinforce them, though. You know, these halberds, you know, I've noticed that Nordir is a very defensive player most of the time, and despite the fact this is a very large push, he does seem to be dragging his heels a little bit with regards to committing some of his infantry. I mean, you need to support units like your Trolls, otherwise they're going to have their hit points bled away, and it's not good for them. As we can see here, there are Elder Pathfinders. You know, these Caragors got into the backs of these Bladesmen and did quite a lot of damage. Again, these Pathfinders, they're not exactly the most durable cav unit, whereas the Melkor's Chosen are, but again, they had their hit points bled away by our Corsair Savages and our front line. So, it's, you know, it's these little decisions that you make during the battle, you know, they can come back to bite you. Meanwhile, if we look up here, we can see that we are surrounding these Elder Royal Guard with a combination of Castamir's Chosen and my Sindar Blade Masters. So we're going to be able to carve our way through them pretty quickly. There are some Witch Realm Pikemen in there, but they're completely out of position and there are only 49 of them. So yeah, Castamir's Chosen a very heavy duty unit, and the Sindar Blade Masters providing the damage that they don't have. Meanwhile, let's go back down here. And again, we can see these Elder Pathfinders, they're going to get a side charge into these halberds, which is why I said you should have committed them earlier, because now they're just being kind of wasted. I mean, victory is a distinct possibility, but look how many of them got lost. It's all relative. And honestly, I'm surprised these Wargs haven't been committed to attack these Balrogs and Olag High. I mean, they're isolated. I mean, there's a cav charge coming in now. With the Wargs, they could be overwhelmed. I mean, the Balrogs, it's hard to tell whether they're bloodied or not. I mean, I think, yeah, they are, because their wings and such are all sort of red. But yes, these Pathfinders, trying to get the money's worth for them, and they're doing a pretty good job of that at the moment. And again, these halberds, completely static. Completely the wrong thing to do as well. I mean, if you're going to push, push. None of this sort of half-committing nonsense. Regardless, we are now also going to be slowly attacking down this hill. Obviously, we have much less of a sort of a wide field to do that with. We're much more confined to a choke point. Look at all those Royal Guard being forced into a corner by Castamir's Chosen. Again, there are Wardens coming into the side of my Sindar Blade Masters and the Castamir's Chosen, also committing some Royal Archers that are out of ammo to the fight, sending forward my other unit of Sindar Blade Masters. And then in the background there we also have some Balagir Halberds in reserve. So yeah, and here is where I make the choice to ignore this front line because we're taking arrow fire. So I'm just going to charge down the hill with my Sindar Blade Masters and engage these Royal Guard in melee. And again, it's something the Royal Guard should probably win in melee. But the important thing is just to get them to stop shooting, because then we'll easily and quickly win the fight further up the hill. And then my Sindar Blade Masters will be reinforced, but they are taking a bit of a harrowing arrow fire ordeal down this hill. But the Sindar Blade Masters are fast, so they are going to get into the melee faster than most other units would. And they do have pretty high melee skill, so they should last a decent amount of time in melee. Meanwhile, down here, Mordor is finally sending forward some units, other than the trolls. Again, there's a Balrog dead, which is a sign that the hit points are gone. They're getting into these wargs. I mean, the wargs, if they're static, will very quickly fall by the wayside to a unit like this. Especially now that there's Olag High coming in as well. Yep, defeat is a distinct possibility. Orc Maulers, they're being sent forward on their own. And there's Elder Pathfinders right there. They're just going to get charged into oblivion. It seems like every match I do, I'm forced to sort of tell people, don't be passive. You know, either focus on defending or push with more might. I mean, sending forward individual units, especially low tier ones, is never worth it. Because you're not going to get anything out of them. I mean, yes, they're meant to be sort of sacrificial meat shield type units. But, you know, they're not really shielding anything like this. They're just sort of there. Lambs to the slaughter, as it were. And they are getting kills on these Elder Pathfinders, but the damage these Pathfinders have done has already, you know, it's already manifested itself. You've already taken tons and tons of losses to them, and they've already paid for themselves. And again, just look at all these units that are doing nothing back here. You know, Gundabad, you know, admittedly, you know, they could be worried about maybe me betraying them and sort of surrounding them. You know, but at the end of the day, if you were worried about that, you should never have come through this valley in the first place. So, who knows? I mean, it's one of those things, I guess. You know, whenever I play Mordor, I play them super aggressive, and it often works. I mean, all too often people aren't prepared for a sort of humongous push. As we can see here, Sindar Blademaster's victory actually seems certain against these Forest Bladesmen and these Elder Royal Guards, so it just goes to show how, you know, important skill can be. I mean, the Elder Royal Guard have hit points and they're very tough, but now with the Naru Royal Archers and the Castamir's Chosen, this flank is certainly going to be ours. And if we look up here, you can see I'm sort of getting some Elder Enway Archers into position on this cliff to try and hit the back ranks of the Woodland Realms. Again, armor-piercing arrows won't do much to the Woodland Realms, but they will at least get some damage done. As we can see, these Orc Maulers, they managed to survive their harrowing charges that they received from the Pathfinders, and now they're dealing with these Warg Riders. But again, these Balrogs have taken another loss, and they haven't really got into the meat of these armies yet. I mean, if you look back here, there's Black Uruk Warband. I mean, they've got a really weird sort of setup, Gundabad. They're sort of deployed all over the place for reasons I'm not entirely sure of. You know, again, there's units back here. They also have some trolls of their own. I mean, there's a unit of Goblin Band in Skiltron. Again, not entirely sure of the purpose of that. There's a Ballista back here, though. Again, Gundabad should really be thinking about forming a sort of decisive front line against Mordor, because while they are, you know, if Mordor had pushed with everything they had, Gundabad would be on the run by now, and you could say that they are already. But I mean, you know, they could have really forced them back, and they could have done some severe damage. Again, a unit of Witch Realm Scourge Raiders coming forward. But I guess then he thinks that, you know, again, we've got these Black Uruk Warband. Sort of a lower to mid-tier melee unit. They look cool, but, you know, maybe their skill doesn't really match the looks, I guess. I like the helms. But maybe he's thinking that if I can sort of attrition down these trolls and these Balrogs, I'll have the advantage going forward. And again, during the battle, I actually wasn't aware of this. I was focusing on our front a little bit more, and I actually thought that Mordor were pushing with a little bit more than they are doing. A little bit disappointed, I must say. But over here, we're having much more success. I mean, as soon as we break through here, the question of whether to push into the sides of both Mordor and Gundabad sort of raises itself. Because we are going to break through these wardens pretty quickly. We've got some archer support up on the hill. These Boquindi are out of ammunition. I'm just sort of using them as a unit to commit if we need a little bit more mass in there. If we look back here, there are still warlords and Corsair fencers, 2 units of them. So we still have elites back here. The majority of my army is still down there in the basin, just waiting. Again, it is a free-for-all, so the more I can keep in reserve until the end, the better our chances. And again, I'm left wondering what on earth Mordor is doing. They're sending forward heavily depleted units of trolls and Balrogs to try and take on Elder Kingsguard, which individually is one of the strongest cavalry units in the game, and they're getting cycle charged into oblivion. It's a sad sight to see trolls just being bullied in this way, and they wouldn't be if not for that back there. You're Mordor, you're not a defensive faction, for crying out loud. Charge! Do something! You're throwing away any advantage you might have had because Gundabad is now committing more and more to the front. Witch Realm Scourge Raiders, they're a pretty good unit as well. I mean, in this sort of situation where they aren't taking arrow fire, the amount of damage they can deliver is pretty lethal. And, you know, each swing, a Balrog is going to get a kill, but they're being very efficiently attritioned out of this fight. Black Uruk Warband, I haven't actually seen much of them, to be honest with you. These Trolls of Gundabad are now getting into the fray, and that will be the death knell for the Balrogs. Such an expensive unit, and again, I don't think they paid for themselves. I don't think they lived up to their potential. They killed a unit of Warg Riders and helped kill a unit of Pikemen. You know, for a unit that costs so much, that's not enough. It's just not enough. And there we are, Gundabad have victory. Very, very unfortunate. But yes, if we look up here, we are victorious, and because we do have a sort of alliance with Mordor going on, we're just going to hold back a little bit. Because obviously Mordor are the ones right there. We're just going to, and again, my archers actually did start shooting these Númenórean Shadow Guard, and we revealed the position of these Goblin Trackers. But I'm not going to shoot Goblin Trackers, that's a waste of my Elder Enway's ammo. Númenórean Shadow Guard is a little bit more worth it, because they are a very decent archer unit. To try and diffuse some of the Gundabad Woodland Realms skirmish power will be useful. These Goblin Trackers moving around. Finally, they're committing their halberds, but it's too late. I mean, you know, this is a push which might actually yield some results, but it's too late for your Trolls, too late for your Balrogs, too late overall, in my opinion. I mean, if you'd committed those units earlier with the Trolls, when Gundabad was a little bit more out of position, you would have, I think Gundabad would have been in real trouble. As it is, though, Mordor allowed them to reform, and this allowed them to really prepare a more comprehensive defence. And again, we've got these Morannon halberds and Sauron's Will and Temple Inquisitors coming forward. If only these units had been committed earlier. You can actually see the time limit in the upper corner there. If both matches had gone without lag, the Osgiliath match and this one would have been longer. Both had lag though, and I think the Osgiliath one, because of the amount of lag it had, did actually go for longer. But even so, it does show how long these free-for-alls can last. These Scourge Raiders sort of retreating a little bit. We've got some Goblin Band here, a completely free unit. So what are Gundabad going to do here? I mean, obviously they're going to get ready to charge into the sides with those Elder Kingsguard. They're also going to use their Ballistae. All of them missing. I think the Ballista's accuracy has been lessened, because the Ballista, in my experience, is now less accurate than the Catapult. Which is wrong. It shouldn't be like that, but no matter. Again, these units ready to meet the next Mordor wave, or not. The Mordor wave is again completely static. Sending forward more units. Morannon halberdiers. You know, against Gundabad's forces they might do okay. Not the Scourge Raiders, but if he sends forward some Guardians of Kharn Dûm, again, pretty savage looking halberdiers. Being sent forward alone again, really? Are you not going to send forward units to help them? There's Uruks back here, and there's Sauron's Will. There's archers as well. Still Uruk archers firing away. What are they targeting? Are they targeting the goblins? This is a comedy of errors if this is true. I mean, why would you target the goblins? You can easily destroy them in melee. They've got shields as well. I mean, yes, they're being destroyed by the arrows, but every arrow wasted, you should definitely be going for the Scourge Raiders. They're weak to arrows and they're good in melee. I'm completely unsure as to what Mordor is doing here. I mean, during when the battle was going on, I wasn't really paying too much attention. I was sort of reforming my army, but I was assuming that Mordor was actually doing a decent job on the push, and there's so many errors being made here. Little individual ones, but they add up to big ones. Oh dear. What a disaster. Mordor Moran on halberds now taking a withering arrow storm from the goblin trackers in the background. A cheap unit being used to good effect. Balance of forces is evenly matched. Now the Sauron's Will are being committed. Good. And the Temple Inquisitors, so this should lead to this frontline fight being pretty heavily in Mordor's favour. Again, these Trolls of Gundabad are coming in. Against the Halberdiers though, they might actually take quite a lot of damage, and with the Temple Inquisitors there, the Trolls are likely to die pretty quickly, honestly. I mean, victory seems certain, but as soon as these Temple Inquisitors start swinging their greatswords, that is likely a change, and we can see Uruks coming in to close the jaws. A lot of arrows coming in, quite a lot of friendly fire, it must be said as well. And here we have the Uruks charging into the Trolls, pinning them in position somewhat. But we also have the Guardians of Khan Dûm. One of the most dependable units in the game, in my experience. Coming in with their big shields, trying to sort of reinforce the Trolls. It's going to be a little bit too late though. I mean, the Temple Inquisitors are so good individually. One of the strongest units in the game. Sauron's Will as well, with their clubs. Their great clubs, or I don't know what you would call them. They look like two-handed morning stars, some of them, and then they've also got the sort of two-handed Uruk-hai scimitars. Again, they're also committing more Black Uruks of the mountains, because now, you know, if you see how quickly they've managed to do damage to the Gundabad front line, they could have done this with Olag-hai and Balrogs in tow if they had just committed them earlier. However, one problem they do have is this Elder Kingsguard, and they are about to flatten these archers. There we go. That's basically going to completely destroy that archer unit. Completely dead. There is a unit of Sauron's Will back here, but I don't think they're going to be sufficient to destroy the Elder Kingsguard. Sauron's Will, their deal is more sort of doing a lot of damage in melee when they're supported. Similar to Trolls in many ways in that respect. Certainly not their durability. And again, if we look over here, you can see just more and more damage being done to Gundabad. I mean, these Guardians of Khan Dûm are not going to survive too long in melee against Temple Inquisitors and Sauron's Will together. And there are Halberdiers still here, dealing with these Scourge Raiders, which have taken a lot of damage now. And these Black Uruks of the mountains have been committed. They're better, but there's just too many Halberdiers and Uruks here for them to make much headway. And at this point, Mordor's push is going relatively well. I mean, the thing that might completely stop that in its tracks are these guys, the Elder Kingsguard. If they get a rear charge over here, that swings the balance back in the favour of the Woodland Realms and Gundabad. The Woodland Realms in particular, their army is still pretty healthy. If we look over here, look at the amount of damage they did to those Uruk archers on the charge. It is quite sickening, and they're doing the same now to Uruks. They've certainly been in very good investment, these Elder Kingsguard, for the Woodland Realms alliance. And they're going to keep on charging through. I mean, the Uruk archers are trying to target them, but the Uruk archers are not going to get too much done against a unit with 3 hit points. Again, another mighty charge. They turn their backs as well at the last second. Which is going to lead to even more death, even more destruction. Oh yes, I didn't mention the Woodland Realms player earlier. It's that. I'm not sure how you pronounce that, so I'm not going to even try. Let's call him 3S. Give him a near name. Now, this is what I was afraid of. There's going to be a rear charge, it looks like, into the backs of these units. Now, the Temple Inquisitors will actually hold relatively firm. Believe it or not, that was a beefy charge they just took, but as soon as they turn around and start swinging their swords, they're going to actually inflict some pretty decent casualties. As you can see, there's a lot of Elder Kingsguard dead there. This all works out in favour of us, our alliance. You know, a lot of death on both sides over here. But in the end, my fair play really got the better of me. If we sat back and just allowed them to bleed themselves out against one another, we would have won pretty handily. Catapult going in on the Woodland Realms lines. None of them hit. But I did decide that fair play should rule, so I decided to make it a true three-way fight pretty soon. And as you can see, these Sauron's will starting to fall by the wayside a little bit. They certainly don't have the survivability, but they do have, you know, even to the point where that charge, it damaged the Temple Inquisitors as well, to the point where the Guardians of Khan Doom now look like they're going to have victory over on this side. Again, this Elder Kingsguard has been so effective so far. Charging into the backs of these Halberdiers as well. There's Witch Realm Blackguard in the background ready to reinforce. So yeah, Mordor really missed their opportunity to overwhelm Gundabad early on. That is a bit of a shame, but it can't really be helped. What's that in the background? So yeah, Uruk archers are still firing into these Elder Kingsguard. Getting some damage done, but not enough. There's the Ballista, and the Ballista is targeting the Catapult. Already 2 of them have been destroyed. Can they get another shot off? Yes, they can. Is that a hit? No. That's an awful miss, actually. And is the Catapult going to die? Yes, it is. Catapult dealt with. The fight continues. The Guardians of Khan Doom and the Temple Inquisitors grinding themselves up against one another. These Elder Kingsguard are just so brutally charging into the backs of the Mordor lines. Again, if they had Olag High and lesser Balrogs in here, it would be a much less attractive proposition. They would be taking much more losses each charge they took, but as it is, they're holding up pretty well, and now the Temple Inquisitors are sort of low enough in number that they're not really going to take many casualties per charge. The Goblin Trackers are in the background. Again, where are the hammers? There are the hammers. So yeah, the Gundabad army has sort of come forward, and they've dealt with this Mordor push relatively well, but again, I do think that Mordor made a lot of mistakes. A lot of mistakes, really. Interestingly enough, let's see back here. We can see that I've got my Elder Enway archers in position, and I am reloading, and I believe this is the point where I decide that I'm just going to shoot at both armies. Indeed, actually, I do go for Mordor first of all, because back over here we can see that it's Sauron's will, and Sauron's will are very vulnerable to archers because they have virtually no armour, and they're a relatively elite unit, so I do decide to go for them. Because Mordor are still a danger. They do still have forces back here, and I believe they already noticed that they're not going to win with that push, so they're sort of retreating up onto this sort of platform over here to try and make a last stand. And hope that ourselves and the Woodland Realms and Gundabad go after one another, doubtless. Over here, the Guardians of Khan Doom. Again, defeat seems certain. The Temple Inquisitors have pulled it back. When they're not being charged, they're so effective in sustained melee. Even the mighty Haven Guard are no match for them. Sauron's will also now getting into the fight. And this works out well, because it means if I don't hit Sauron's will, I'll hit Temple Inquisitors or Guardians of Khan Doom. Perfect for me, and again he sent forward more Sauron's will over here to reinforce his ailing lines, and he's going to get some damage done to these Black Uruks and these Scourge Raiders, finish them off. But ultimately this push from Mordor is coming to an end, and I have to say it was not too effective. It could have been much more effective than it was. Gundabad took some pretty heavy losses, but the Woodland Realms remains largely intact. Elder Kingsguard charging in there. Again, we can see these Temple Inquisitors, the Guardians of Khan Doom fighting. Coming under the arrow fire of my Elder Enway archers, both taking losses. Both sides taking losses, that's exactly what we want to see. Again, just withering arrow fire all round. So deadly. These Sauron's will are doing a pretty good job though. I mean, again, they are up against Scourge Raiders and Black Uruks and, well, two different units of Black Uruks, the Warband and of the Mountains. They're all so depleted that they should do a decent job. Indeed, the Sauron's will are actually going to charge right on through them, but now with this big unit of Black Uruks, they should fall. So the attack is coming to an end, and this is phase 2 of the battle coming to an end, and there is a pretty lengthy cut to phase 3, it must be said. There's a lot of manoeuvring around. And phase 2 we were largely inactive. You know, we pushed down the hill, but that was largely it. fact, if we look over here, there is actually a little bit more of a presence over here now. What do we have? We have goblins, catapult crew. Catapult crew and Uruk archers taking on Castamir's Chosen. That can only end one way. Indeed. So back over here is the last engagement, really. But yes, we were largely inactive for that phase, just as Gundabad and the Woodland Realms were largely inactive for the first phase. And then phase 3 is where we all go into the battle at differing times and a victor will be decided. At this point, it's looking pretty good for us. I mean, if we were to hold our current defensive position, I would say there was no way we could lose, to be honest. But in the interest of fairness, I do advance, so it is going to be an interesting sort of thing. Again, I don't have cavalry, but we do. We still have our Warlords of Umbar in perfect condition, whereas these Kingsguard have taken quite a lot of losses. So that should be an interesting one. Again, those units are disappearing, they're hiding. And these hammer and anvil charges will bring about the end of these Mordor units. Brutal, brutal charges on these. Sauron's will. And the Black Uruks I think are a pretty good unit. They don't have hit points, but you can have them in decent numbers. There's a lot in the unit. And they do a good amount of damage, so if they're supported by a lower tier unit in particular, it's a good front line. A good unit to support a front line anyway. So this is it. As soon as these Sauron's will are cleared up, that is basically all of the engagements finished with, although there are still red triangles on our line. These catapult crewmen are still bravely fighting on against these Castamir's Chosen. It's not going to be enough though, is it? Oof. Took his face off with his heavy scimitar. I do like the Castamir's Chosen units. The Harbingers are included in that. I like the uniforms, the heavy umbar plate and mail. I'm not sure if I prefer it to the Naru units though. I mean, the Naru units don't have some of them don't have gauntlets, which is kind of strange. No hand protection for archers. Anyway, is that the end of the fight over here? I believe it is. Yes, it is. So amazingly, the catapult crew lasted long. Oh, it looks like they're routing actually. Yes, they are. So Mordor is going to retreat, and they are going to retreat over to here. As you can see in the background, I am actually going to send forward my Elder Enway. You know, they've got about half their ammunition left, so I'm going to try and go for something like Temple Inquisitors or Balrogs or something like that. But ultimately, it is just like a very basic skirmish, and it isn't really too effective either way for either side. And the same can be said of, well, nothing is happening over here, to be honest. So yes, now is the time for another cut, and it's going to be a pretty lengthy cut to the third and final phase of this battle. So, as you can see, I am beginning my assault on Mordor's final position while my ally covers the rear and holds off Gundabad and the Woodland Realms once again. So obviously I abandoned my defensive position and came forward to attack Mordor because I felt like they had a small enough army that I could try and overwhelm them, but it is a severe hill we're going up, and it is some elite units that we are fighting. These Balrogs as well are pushing their way through and are going for my Noldor Elder Nobles. So bad news for me on that front, it must be said. Although, you know, the Balrogs will die because like they are forcing their way through. They're taking horrendous amounts of damage all the while. I've got my Storm Raiders, I've got my archers that are out of ammunition, they're bloodied up already. But, you know, it's still annoying because I'm trying to get my archers to shoot into units that are back here. In particular, I'm trying to get them to hit Temple Inquisitors because they're the unit that I'm most concerned with of these. Everything else I can either outlast or overwhelm. If we look over here, we can see my ally has sort of set himself out. All the while, the Gundabad and Woodland Realms alliance waits, and these Elder Royal Council are firing. Now, it is an interesting thing. It's a difficult situation to be in, I admit, because you're not really sure what you want to do, and you know they're targeting my Storm Raiders, unfortunately, so I need to get them out of there before they die to the ballista. There's also one dead warlord over there. Now, I admit that it is a bit of a tricky situation. However, the one thing that I told my ally not to do was to charge down this valley, because charging into the Woodland Realms with their superior archers is complete and utter suicide. You know, it's going to cause your army to break in a horrendous fashion. Now, he's not actually charging here. He's forming up his men into shield wall so he can try and better resist the archers. And he's trying to get his halberdiers in behind it. Now, I actually did overestimate how many men my ally actually had left when I told him to sort of guard the rear. If I knew this, I would have not attacked Mordor, to be honest with you. I wasn't really paying attention because with this sort of army, he would never have been able to hold off the Gundabad and Woodland Realms advance. He's got some fences, but that's not really going to be sufficient. And my army is sort of, it's doing okay. We're just trying to sort of deal with these Balrogs first and foremost. And again, they're getting kills on my men, but there's not really much I can do about that. Again, these Balrogs are not going to... the Storm Raiders actually have sufficient melee skill to block the giant attacks. Again, they are now dying finally, which is good because it means I'm going to be able to get my Noldor into position to shoot Mordor. And again, I don't blame Mordor for taking up this position because their army was by far the most damaged. If you look up here, he's managed to sort of retreat his Nazgul, both units of his Nazgul, up onto this little hillside behind the unit of Morgul Chosen. So it is an interesting position we all find ourselves in. Again, the smart thing for me to do would have been to sit back and defend, but I didn't want to do that because I would have felt dirty, to be honest with you, if I did that after doing it in phase 2 of the battle. So yes, it's an interesting situation we all find ourselves in. There's one lesser Balrog trying his best. Killed a few Noldor elders, which, it's no mean feat. These Noldors are an extremely, extremely powerful unit. And he's at least bloodying them up, but, he's not going to last too much longer, you would think. Got some Sindar Blade Masters still alive as well. They're eager and they're warmed up. Defeat seems almost certain, though. These archers really getting into the thick of things. If we go back over to here, to the front line, we can see that battle has well and truly been met. The Morgul Chosen and the Númenórean Shield Guard, two very strong shield units, holding the line with the assistance of these Temple Inquisitors. The Temple Inquisitors, though, will have to get through Eldarenway Spearmen, although they're not in the ideal formation because of how I'm having to advance uphill. Look at that. That might be a good screenshot, actually. If I'm able to sort of get the angle right. Very well. Now, my Storm Raiders, their job is done, so I'm sort of sending them back over because I do notice that my ally is not exactly... His army isn't exactly in the rudest of health, shall we say. So I'm sending over my Storm Raiders to potentially reinforce his fences, and I'm going to send over my sort of depleted archers instead to help with the push, because the Storm Raiders will be much more useful, I think, to my ally. Sending in my archers now. It's going to be a slog, and I'm going to take a lot of losses, to be honest. And this only plays into the Woodland Realms and Gundabad's hands, but at this point I'm committed, so it's too late. But we shall see. The winds of battle often change. They haven't actually blown in Mordor's favour for much of this match, it must be said. Look back over here. The Warlords of Umbar are still alive, though. They could be pretty valuable at dealing with that Elder Kingsguard. And I do like the look of the Warlords of Umbar. I like the look of the Umbar armour in general. The mix of sort of scale mail and plate and chain mail is pretty cool. That sort of eastern look. Back here we can see the fencers. I mean, the fencers are going to be pretty key. I mean, dealing with the Gundabad high tier units like the Blackguard and the Witch Realm Hammers are going to be key. If the Woodland Realms get them in melee, though, their armour piercing is rather wasted. Here come the Storm Raiders. I do love the look of the Storm Raiders. I do like their swords as well. I like the fact that they're meant to be an anti-cavalry unit, and that will be much more their focus in the next patch.
Defeat seems almost certain.
Defeat. Defeat comes for us. Or does it? The fact is I'm going to be able to push through here eventually. Victory might seem like a certainty, but now that I'm shooting in here with my Noldor, as soon as the Temple Inquisitors are weakened to an extent that is acceptable, the spears are not going to be able to hold back my push. These Morgul Chosen and these Nazgul. The Nazgul hiding on their hill. Again, I could go for them with my arrows, but it is a bit of a waste. Oof. Look at that. Taking ballista fire, and I was telling my ally he would be much better off in loose. Loose formation is the way to go if you're under sustained arrow fire, and this is where he makes the most horrendous mistake possible. I told him I kept telling him not to charge into the woodland realms. There are pikes at the front, and there are all manner of archers behind. I mean, you're going to get absolutely eviscerated if you go down here. But he charges regardless, and this is basically going to be the end of his entire army. I mean, at least it's going to be the end of his chosen and his halberds. I mean, he's got his royal archers back there, but you know, this is a complete waste of units. It's never... Sit back and loose. You know, let them use their ammunition and let them come to you. I mean, look at that pike line. I mean, I've gone on record as saying that pikes are not exactly as strong as they used to be, but the Avari pikes are stronger than most, and there are so few of these Castamir's chosen. And they're tired, and now they're going to be swamped by bladesmen. There's also there's Elder Royal Council in the background ready. I mean, Corsairs, Fencers, they're going to take a beating on the approach from arrows. At least I assume, yep, there goes the arrow. The enemy know exactly what to target, and the Fencers are going to get eviscerated. So yeah, this was a very, very poor mistake. And I mentioned earlier Mordor making the mistake of not advancing as one. This mistake is far, far worse. It's exactly not the thing you want to do, and unfortunately, this probably is what's going to cause our defeat. This, you know, his army is going to buckle, and then I'm going to be caught between a rock and a hard place over here. Because Mordor's defensive position is pretty strong. I mean, if he's able to sort of hold firm, and if he gets my army to do a lot of damage to the woodland rounds and Gundabad, he could yet win this. Again, it's a tricky situation. I mean, that advance has basically cost us the match at this point, you know, and I remember seeing it and I was like, well, that's it for us then, because I can't win this on my own. I mean, I'm going to take a lot of losses taking out Mordor, which I can do, but I'm not going to be able to face then a very, very healthy force of woodland realms and Gundabad. And if we look down there, again, just look at this. I mean, the Avari pikes are taking a few losses. You know, they've got this sort of crescent moon-shaped surround. And again, I actually did try and send forward some... Well, I was going to send forward some... Well, he still have Blackguard as well. Now they're getting targeted by arrows. And here I do add to the mistake somewhat, because while I was annoyed, I felt, well, he's going to die here. And if I don't reinforce him, I'm going to die. So I do make a move to sort of move my Storm Raiders forward, but of course the enemy, being vigilant, notice my Storm Raiders advance, and they are vulnerable to missiles as well. So the Elder Royal Council are making a mockery of them. So again, I added to the mistake, which didn't help. But again, if you're in that sort of situation, never charge the woodland realms down a narrow corridor where there's pikes at the front. You know, you're much better off just sitting back and taking ballista fire, if I'm honest. Just sit it there. Again, loose formation. Loose formation is good for taking cavalry charges and dealing with ranged fire. You know, use the loose formation. It's underused, I think. Look at these spears there. Ugh, my throat's getting a bit dry. I've been talking for so long. It's been one of those marathon matches again. As you can see, my Noldor are now out of ammunition, so I'm just waiting for the right opportunity to commit them, because I can see over here we're starting to wrap around, and that means I'm going to have a way in behind this spear line. And again, I actually retreated my Storm Raiders because they were taking such heavy losses. It wasn't worth my advance. He's committed his Royal Archers as well. It's a heartbreaking sight, it really is. The Woodland Realms and Gundabad now certainly have the advantage in this match. Naaru Royal Archers. No Abrazanim in this fight, interestingly enough, of any variety. No Nardubawib, no Nudar Tariq, and no Narduzagar. Nadu Tariq, I think, is the way you pronounce it. I don't know. Umbar make things difficult. I'm just waiting for one of the new factions to have even harder pronunciation than Umbar. And I'm trying to figure out what that could be. Look at these pikes. Pushing as one into these Royal Archers. See the Goblin Trackers now adding their own mass to the melee. And the Sindar Blade Masters are going to easily wrap up this force. And as we can see in the background, they still have their Royal Council. They still have Goblin Trackers with ammunition. And they still have their Witch Realm units and some Black Uruks. There's the Hammer Guard. More Black Uruks. And there are the there are the Elder King's Guard anyway. Again, you can see the Crescent Moon surround is kind of establishing itself. There isn't really much to be said at this point. And there is a little bit of a gap appearing on this side as well. Quindi are starting to seep through. The Temple Inquisitors, I used up all my ammunition on them. Only killed a few of them, to be fair, but you know, they are a very tough unit indeed. It comes down to 2 fights on 2 fronts, and we're winning on one, but we're losing on this one. Look at all those goblins. Victory seems like a distinct possibility now, but you know, it's only because like these Forest Bladesmen at the front, with these pikes and with these Sindar Blade Masters, it's not going to be enough. And definitely not. And over here you can see that I'm actually sort of retreating some of my Storm Raiders and my Noldor, because I was thinking, well, if I sort of retreat over here, you know, it might be possible that the Woodland Realms and Gundabad sort of go up and attack them, and I can sort of leave some units for the very end. But then I realised that they still have cavalry, so that's a pointless exercise because I'll just get charged into oblivion. And so eventually I do decide to advance. These spears are holding very firm though, with the assistance of the Temple Inquisitors. If we see down here, the Naru Naaru, defeat seems certain. As you can see, there's still actually quite a lengthy amount of time to this battle, and that is true, although for a large amount of the final portion I will be times-6ing the speed, because it does turn into a bit of a slogfest. For the time being, the fight on 2 fronts. If you're wondering what the other 2 sort of units in the distance are, there's a unit of halberds sort of preventing us from being surrounded, and this unit over here, of course, is my ballista, which is sort of welded to the cliffside. Unfortunately for me, let's go back over here to the big push. Well, I'm not quite ready to commit my forces just yet, but as you can see, Umbar's failure is almost complete. The suicidal charge has proved itself to be very, very ineffective. And it's actually, Umbar's failure is not over just yet. There are more mistakes to be made. And I don't want to be too harsh on my ally, but then again, I do know who he is, so he won't mind too much. But yeah, the mistakes that he made in this battle were numerous. And again, I did make a few mistakes as well. Like, if we were doing the smart thing, we never would have attacked. But, you know, it makes the battle interesting, and I wasn't losing on this front. But then my Quindi are starting to get shaken and exhausted. And now is the moment where I'm going to get in behind them with my Storm Raiders and my Noldor. He still has his Warlords, and his Warlords are going to have to sort of cover the rear of my army on their own, because his foot contingent of units is now gone. A tragedy in black, as the Umbar forces are dressed in. Here come the Elder King's Guard. They've already done huge amounts of damage. Is this where his general is, I wonder? It's hard to tell. I mean, I would assume so. It's either that or the Royal Council. Where are the Royal Council? Nope, that's Azog, so his general's in a unit of Númenórean Shadow Guard, which is interesting. Nope, Thranduil is in the Council. And here is Umbar's other mistake. The Elder King's Guard are now in, and the very... Well, actually, no, this is not the moment where that happens. My apologies. Bit of a spoiler there for the future of what happens. But yes, the Elder King's Guard are sort of waiting. The Warlords of Umbar are waiting. And over here you can see I'm starting to get in behind the lines of these forces with my Noldor and with my Storm Raiders, and I'm about to wrap up this Mordor force. And then it's up to me what I do with the remnants of my army. And here it is. The Elder King's Guard, my ally, caught extremely flat-footed. His cavalry left there. The Corsair Blackguards are still there. And again, these Elder King's Guard They are going to charge into the back of this blob. And with all this Quindy, it is a juicy, juicy target indeed. Charging into them, it's just... ugh. Quindy offer basically no resistance. It's like a hot knife through butter. A true tragedy.
Only half the enemy force remains.
Hard to tell whose that is. It can't be Mordor's. I mean, there are spikes in here, so it's possible that if they destroy my army to such an extent, they might actually get into the stakes. But yes, again, I was like basically screaming at my ally at this point to say, where is your cavalry? What are you doing with it? And it was over here, not protecting me at all. I mean, I was dumbfounded by what my ally was doing here. Again, the blackguards are over here, and the cavalry was just too slow. Too slow. I mean, my ally made a lot of mistakes here in this phase 3, and it did end up, you know, spoilers, my forces don't win. It's either Mordor, due to their extremely defensive position up here with their Nazgul, or it's Woodland Realms and Gundabad with their superior numbers. We do not win. Look at these warlords. Now they get into the action, but still they're caught kind of wrong-sided, and I'm still being charged. There are spikes there, but they don't really charge right into the spikes. And look at how many men I've lost just from those charges alone. The Elder Kingsguard have really been the MVPs in this match for the Woodland Realms. I believe when all was said and done, I think they got about 1,000 kills. And if we look down here, the Blackguard taking arrow fire. Again, to a large extent, they were wasted. I mean, all in all, they would have been better off helping me on my front. Close range javelin fire, getting through that Mordor shield wall. I would have taken far less losses. Again, that was something that I didn't point out though, so that was something that I missed during the battle as well. Yes, the Woodland Realms commence their advance. These Corsair Blackguards are going to be defeated by Sindar Blade Masters. I believe at this point the Kingsguard is, you know, they are over here, but they are depleted. Only 9 of them left. The Warlords of Umbar sitting and guarding my lines, and as you can see, I have managed to defeat the Mordor shield wall. But, you know, those cav charges led to such hefty losses in the ranks of my sort of supporting units, like my Elder Renway Archers and my Quindy. But I don't really fancy taking on that Mordor shield wall over there, so I'm going to set up here. And then it will be up to, well, at least the idea eventually is that the Woodland Realms and Gundabad will have to advance in between us, and then we can sort of pincer move them, and then may the best man win, so to speak. But yes, this is... we're getting into sort of the sharp end of the fight now. The Blackguards are dead. But really based on the numbers that the Woodland Realms and Gundabad have available to them, they should win this. There are still a few Temple Inquisitors in this mix. Well, he died. There's the other... well, that's a Morgul Chosen. Going up against Archers and Quindy, and there's a few Sindar Blade Masters there. There's also a Noldor Elder right there, so he should die pretty quickly now. I mean, he's tough. I mean, some of the high-tier Mordor spear units are very tough. This was a much longer battle than I remember. I mean, it had lag as well. Regardless, here we can see, once again, my ally is made to look like a fool because his cavalry was just duped completely by the Kingsguard. Now, fortunately, I am behind the spikes, so he isn't going to charge me. At least I don't think he is. We'll see what he does. I mean, I think he's just going to... I think actually at this point he goes to my ballista, which honestly I don't care about. I mean, I'll try and shoot him on the approach, but I don't think I get any hits. But again, the fact that my ally's cav game was weak. Weak. In fact, at this point it might be an idea just to time 6 it, because there isn't really much going on for the time being. I mean, I think I do make a probing attack on this shield wall, but it doesn't really go to plan because I try to force through with mass, and the pathfinding decides that what I really want to do is retreat. So it doesn't really go to plan. I lose more Quindy needlessly, really. You'll notice when I try and force my way through, because my army decides to go in the opposite direction to the Nazgul. There they go. That was me trying to force my way through, and the pathfinding deciding that that's not what I want to do at all. These warlords charging in. Their shame complete. They decide to commit Sudoku against the Sindar Blade Masters. There's still Elder Kingsguard as well. There goes the Umbar General. And he admitted defeat as well. I mean, he had nothing left. I mean, he had that unit of halberdiers left, but, you know, they were so far away, and they would have just been charged anyway. So now it's the waiting game. In fact, I might even make a cut here. So here we can see Gundabad leading the way up onto this hill with their goblin trackers, and I think they're instantly going to rout, actually, because they're already wavering and they're very tired. Well, they're just shaken now. No, they're routing. Well, yeah, not the best thing to lead the way with, really. Now, Mordor took quite a lot of ballista fire, but his Nazgul is still there. Now, we had a sort of pact to not attack each other and only attack Gundabad. Interestingly enough, it was revealed that the Mordor player actually promised that he wouldn't attack them either as they went up the hill, which is madness, because he would obviously lose if that was the case. But fortunately for me, he lied about that, so the politics of a free-for-all, eh? Here my Linden Longspears get caught out of position against the Vari Elders, so a unit of 6 is going to get itself slaughtered. Let's speed this up a little bit. Again, I think that they were a little bit overcautious in their approach. I mean, it's pretty clear that they have such a heavy advantage now that they can just sort of charge in and make it more interesting. I've got my Noldor. I've sort of spread my units around a little bit. I'm going to do my best to hold this section. I'm going to charge in and engage these Black Uruks of the mountains. Again, my units aren't really healthy enough nor heavy duty enough in the most part to deal with this. A lot of my Quindi actually did survive up to this point, but they aren't the sort of units that can win you the late game. Still got Sindar Blade Masters, the Mladris Storm Raiders. The Noldor are really my only hope. Mordor still sat up on that hill, but they are now attacking. For once, taking the initiative. Here we have the enemy Sindar Blade Masters, so the same unit fighting each other. The Nazgul up there on the hill as well. Will they be committed? I mean, at this point, I'm just going to commit it to 6 speed. Well, actually, no, I'll commit it to 2 speed. Come on, game. Do what I want. There we go. So as we can see, you know, I'm trying to sort of surround them and make the engagement as favourable for me as I can, but I don't really have enough men to do that with. Neither does Mordor. I mean, he's able to send in his Morgul Chosen and his Nazgul, but there aren't really enough of them. And they still have their Witch Realm units as well. That's really going to be the kicker. Real kick in the teeth. My Noldor are here. The Black Uruks. We'll be able to kill quite a few Black Uruks. But the Elder Council, I mean, the Elder Council is such a strong unit in melee as well. Similar to my Noldor in many ways. I've got a unit of Sword Quindi, which are just out of the fight for now. But a unit of 29 Quindi is not really going to be enough to turn around the tide of this fight. And here in the late game, particularly it's where the Wood Elves tend to shine. The Woodland Realms, I should say, or Mirkwood. Because so many of their archers and their late game units tend to have hit points and such high defense and attack that it's hard to turn around. Now that will be changing slightly. They are getting, you know, they're the ones getting the most noticeable nerf in the next patch, I think, 0.92. And Gundabad are the other ones, interestingly enough, although for different reasons. Gundabad, a lot of their strength, I think, comes from their variety. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out with regards to the nerfs that they receive. While if we look over here, my forces are starting to flag. I mean, a lot of Quindi was left, and that's not going to be sufficient in the late game for me to do much. I mean, against the Black Uruks, they might do okay, but certainly not against Elder Royal Council. Still got a few Spearmen as well. I mean, they performed very well, but, you know, they were mostly subject to attrition up that hill. One of the Nazgul is dead. One of the Mordor generals. My general is, of course, in my Noldor Elder unit. Don't know where he is, though. I'm sure we shall find out when he perishes. Sindar Blade Masters. We can see the Nazgul in here. Now is the time, I think, to flick it up into 6 speed. Because the enemy have really overwhelmed our lines. The Nazgul are trying to retreat back up the hill.
Something changes in the course of battle. For defeat
But look
seems
at the
normal,
writhing
the enemy are badly
mass.
bloodied. They have lost half their... Our men have slain the enemy general.
There goes the
Down
Gundabad
here,
general
his
though.
troops
I mean, he
will
was
lose
in
their
a
will to
Shadow
fight.
Guard unit, which means the general's stats weren't particularly too high, so as soon as he got into melee against the Nazgul, it was a foregone conclusion. That was actually the Wood Elves general, actually. You could see Thranduil fall there.
Pray something changes
So
in the
interestingly
course of
enough,
battle,
my general
for
still
defeat
lives, but
seems
as you can
almost
see,
certain.
I mean, it's over for me. My army is doomed. The end of days indeed. My Noldor still have 27 left.
Fought long and are
Well,
becoming
there we
tired.
go. A lot of my Quindi just routed, so that means it's just going to be my Noldor Elders. And they're up against Witch Realm Hammerguard. And Elder Royal Council, they don't stand a chance.
Our foolish general has
There goes my
thrown his
general.
life away.
So the only general remaining is one of the Mordor ones, either Nordias or who is it? Brainy Smurfs, yeah, that's it, not 3S. 3S is the Woodland Realms player. And so here we are, the final stand of the Nazgul, and as you can tell from the timer, they make a very comprehensive final stand. Admittedly, the Gundabad player went AFK, so he didn't commit his forces, otherwise it would have been a lot faster. But the Nazgul, they did a very good job at sort of lasting here. Just goes to show, individually their skill is great, and actually they are getting a buff in the next patch, because as it stands they are a little too fragile to be worth it for their price.
Enemy general lies dead.
Well, there goes the general. So now no generals remain. Mutually assured destruction. Yes, this was a long fight. I don't know if recording... I'm sure recording-wise it isn't as long as the Osgiliath one, but maybe in terms of actual playtime it was. Again, that's the nature of a free-for-all, I guess. The gaps in between really make it a long fight. There was a bit of lag, but not as much lag as, of course, the huge fight in Osgiliath. Horton, I think, is working on another scenario, so hopefully I'll be able to do that one as well. Very large fights indeed. The Nazgul still stand. Now here comes Gundabad. This is where the Gundabad player came back and committed his goblins. I mean, come on, commit your Witch Realm units for God's sake. You can see the Blackguard in the background. They've taken like no losses at all. They will be able to go back to Mount Gundabad completely healthy. And there we are. That is the end. And again, I think that the right team won because they made the right calls. They targeted the right units with their range. They handled the situations that were thrown at them correctly. I think Mordor, their push, it looked impressive when they were going through the valley, but ultimately it turns out that they were too passive on the attack. And obviously, you know, the attack that I decided to mount was not really the smart thing to do, but it was the interesting thing to do. And my ally, well, my ally didn't exactly make the right call with charging down that canyon into the Woodland Realms, and he could have used his cavalry better, shall we say. Let's see. Can we see my allies' kills? No, just mine. So obviously my Noldor got the most kills, I believe, yes. You know, and then my Sindar Blade Master's got a lot of kills as well, so a decent spread for all my units, but ultimately it was not enough. So yes, I hope you enjoyed this free-for-all. It was a long one, again. You know, the next video will either be the Gondorian Winged Swordsman quality versus quantity, or if I get another good replay in the interim, it might be that instead. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for that.